Hello everyone and welcome to Fright Night. Are you ready for another scary story? A young girl's first month at college, an irresponsible dormmate trying to pick a fight, and the terrifying night things finally hit a boiling point. While some tales tell of fear-inducing monsters or beyond creepy serial killers, others, like this one, hide their horror in the dark. And maybe we're actually better off not knowing what's out there. Are you sure you're ready for the classic urban legend, Turn Off the Lights? Michelle stared from the window of the bus that ferried students from her hometown to the nearby college campus. Her parents waved her off with happy smiles and tears of joy, and while she was secretly pretty nervous about her first year in college, she offered them a reassuring smile in return and pressed her hand against the glass. Just then, she heard the rumble of the bus's engine, and off they were. She watched as they passed all of her childhood haunts, the old mall, that restaurant she always spent family dinners at, and after a few minutes, businesses became houses, and houses were fewer and farther in between patches of forest, and eventually, all of this was replaced by sprawling farmlands divided by woodlands. The drive to the college campus was only about an hour, and Michelle didn't mind. She'd always enjoyed the region's scenery. During this drive, however, she must have dozed off, because the next thing she knew, she was being awakened by the bus driver and they were parked right off of the college's quad. She grabbed her bags and followed a line of young adults around her age towards a small station in front of a much larger brick building. When she reached the front of this line, she was greeted by a girl maybe 4 or 5 years older than herself. "Hey," started the girl cheerfully, "first time up here?" "Yes," replied Michelle, "just trying to get situated for my freshman year." "No problem," continued the girl. "Are you taking care of housing for yourself, or are you going to be staying in the dorms?" "Dorms," replied Michelle, offering her a printout that was provided after registering for said dorms. "Awesome," exclaimed the girl, inspecting the document. "So it looks like you'll be in the 3rd room on the 5th floor, and you'll be sharing that dorm. That's not going to be a problem, is it?" "Oh," began Michelle nervously. No, that's no problem at all." In reality, she hadn't thought about the whole sharing dorm situation, and as she made her way through the lobby and into the elevator, she hoped that her new roommate was nice, clean, and respectful. Upon arriving to the 5th floor and locating her dorm, however, she found things couldn't have been further from that hope. When she entered the room, she was greeted by a girl that was maybe a year or two older. She was clad in all black, had tattoos, had purposefully overdone her makeup, and was in the middle of smoking a rather large joint. The walls on her side of the room were completely plastered with both band posters and images that verged on being too adult for school, and across her bed, desk, and floor space was a mess of dirty clothing. "Hey," started Michelle slowly, "I'm Mich—" But before she could finish her sentence, the girl cut her off. "I'm going to stop you right there," she said in a bossy tone. "I don't care who you are. I'm June. You stay on your side of the room and I'll stay on mine. I can tell you right now, we're not going to be friends." Though Michelle tried to warm June up on multiple occasions, there was just no breaking through her icy exterior. Over the next few weeks, she left the toilet clogged, left food out to rot, threw her used tissues and garbage all around the room, and played loud music pretty much consistently. On top of this, June seemed to have a different guy over every day, and their extracurricular activities would get quite noisy later at night. Michelle would never forget the first time she'd come back to the dorm following night class, ready for bed, and had rushed through the door and had flicked on the light only to be greeted by an angry June and her new boy toy for the night, yelling at her to turn off the lights. Unfortunately, this wasn't a one-time thing either, and Michelle, who wasn't used to living with someone so promiscuous, would end up accidentally turning the lights on during multiple should-be intimate moments between June and whoever she'd ended up bringing home that day. The sad part was, June's behavior was actually losing Michelle's sleep and affecting her grades. Michelle tried to change dorms, express her concerns over her roommate, and even had her floor's RAs stopping by at random times in hopes he would catch her in the act. But June was quick, and every time a check-in transpired, somehow she'd always managed to clean up any evidence to the contrary that she wasn't a totally perfect student. After exhausting her options, Michelle took a different approach. She bought headphones at the campus store and decided that she would just block her irritating dormmate out entirely. When she was ready for bed, she'd throw on her new headphones, start up her favorite playlist, and ignore everything having to do with June. One night, however, things changed. Michelle went to a local party, and though she was set on just stopping by, a boy she was interested in convinced her to stay for a drink. Well, that one drink led to 2, which led to 4, which led to 8, and by the time she was leaving, Michelle was decently drunk. So much so that she'd forgotten about June entirely. As she exited the elevator and stumbled back towards her dorm though, she was issued a harsh reminder when she neared her door and could already hear wild grunts and moaning from within that were most definitely from June and whoever else might be in there with her. Not wanting to disturb them, Michelle pre-gamed by putting her earphones in early. She ignored the light switch, made a beeline for her bed, and closed her eyes. And though she couldn't hear much past the headphones, as songs ended, in that silent space between tracks, she could hear June's vocalizations, which persisted for hours. Finally, after what felt like forever, sleep claimed her. The next morning, Michelle's alarm brought her to. She stretched, let out a big sigh, and took a moment to appreciate the light trails cutting through her blinds. She sat up in bed and was just about to plan her day when something on the other side of the room caught her attention. When her eyes adjusted, she let out a blood-curdling scream. June's bed was soaked with blood. Her body was laying on the mattress, contorted into a broken shape with her stomach completely opened up. Her decapitated head was on the floor in a pile of dirty laundry next to the bed. And on the wall behind this horrifying scene, painted in crimson, was a simple but terrifying message. Aren't you glad you didn't turn on the light? What a chilling story, but where did it come from? And is there any truth behind this gruesome tale of terror? Historically speaking, initial versions of what is more commonly called "Aren't you glad you didn't turn on the lights?" or "The roommate's death" began circulating sometime through the 1970s, and usually on college campuses across the United States, marking it as relatively new in comparison to some of the other urban legends I've covered. By the early 1980s, the tale had spread across the globe, after which various folklorists would begin documenting and cementing its place in modern culture. And in 1984, variants of this story were featured both in Master of Urban Legends Jan Harold Brunvon's The Choking Doberman, as well as in the Book of Nasty Legends by Paul Smith. Over the following decade, while the story grew in popularity, almost every version told was different from the last, with some detailing the peril of young renters returning home, others of siblings staying in alone, and others still regarding a young girl off at college. In 1996, Turn the Lights Off was included in Gail DeVos's Tales, Rumors, and Gossip. And in 1998, the classic horror movie Urban Legend would feature a rendition similar to the one I told tonight when, and big spoiler alert here, the protagonist, Natalie, returns to her dorm to find her roommate, Tosh, seemingly in bed with yet another man, only to wake up the next morning and find our killer's disturbing message written on the wall above her roommate's dead body. Following its usage in said movie, Aren't You Glad You Didn't Turn on the Lights was featured in a number of books and reprints, such as the 1999 Best Book of Bizarre But True Stories Ever. And as the legend picked up traction online, through the 2000s, the popular website Snopes would delve into its history, as would users on a ton of different forums. Through the early 2000s, the story would begin to make its way onto various blogs and subreddits. Some would discover it through chain emails, and the popular television show Supernatural would include it in its Hookman episode, which actually featured quite a few good urban legends. From 2010 up through the present, the story of this anonymous campus serial killer has continued to spread like wildfire. For those of you who are educated in the inner workings of the English language, this next part probably won't come as much of a shock. As far as purpose to this legend goes, it's pretty obvious that it was likely created by parents who were trying to scare their kids into following the rules while away at college. And honestly, it does a good job of that. Michelle, our main character, is never actually in trouble from a literary standpoint. The protagonist always ends up surviving this tale, whereas June, or our story's secondary antagonist, who sleeps around, is a slob who probably does drugs, drinks, whatever, is not only found dead, but in a brutal manner. Now, what do you guys think? Is this story true, or just another eloquent bit of horror writing? Well, I'll just rip the band-aid off and say it. Not once, meaning literally never, has this series of events ever transpired. And if they ever did happen, such incidents certainly weren't documented. But I guess that's how urban legends go, don't they? Can we really decipher the fact from the fiction? In the end, that's what makes them fun and simultaneously scary. So before you rush through that door after work, pull out your flashlight down that particularly intimidating alleyway, or get back to your dorm after late nights in class. Make sure you check your surroundings. Listen for anything that sounds or seems off. And always remember that you never really know what's waiting out there in the darkness.